Anna lives in a small apartment on the east side of the city. Her alarm clock rings at 5 a.m. every weekday morning. She takes 2 buses to get to her job. She spends her days cleaning the offices in a tall glass building downtown. She works hard every single week, scrubbing floors, wiping down desks. Her paycheck helps cover the rent for her small apartment and buys groceries for her family. There is never anything left over. She has no savings account to speak of. One month, her old washing machine finally gave out. The sudden expense felt like a disaster. She had to borrow money from a cousin, and the weight of that debt made her feel worried for months. Across town, in a large house with a sprawling garden, lives Mr. Lee. He owns the building where Anna works, and many others. He does not wake up at 5 a.m. to catch a bus. He does not clean phones. He does not fix leaking pipes himself. Instead, he earns rent from hundreds of people who live and work in his properties. His bank accounts hold substantial savings. He has a portfolio of investments that grows larger each year. When his luxury car needed a major repair last fall, he paid with a swipe of a card without a second thought. He does not worry when something breaks. It is an inconvenience, not a crisis. Anna and Mr. Lee live in the same city. They might even pass each other on the street without a glance. But their lives are worlds apart. This stark difference is the gap between the wealthy and everyone else. To truly understand the problem of economic inequality, we often get lost in complex theories and abstract debates. But sometimes the clearest picture emerges not from complexity, but from a single, stark number. A clear number helps us see the scale of this divide. It cuts through the noise and reveals the architecture of our economic reality. It is a number that can be shocking in its simplicity, yet it tells a story of 2 vastly different American experiences. Before we look at that number, it's important to be clear about what we're measuring. We're not just talking about income, the money you earn from a job. We're talking about wealth. Wealth, or net worth, is the total value of everything a person or family owns. Their assets, like a home, savings in the bank, and investments in the stock market. From that, we subtract all their debts, their liabilities, like a mortgage, car loans, student debt, and credit card balances. What's left is their wealth. It's the financial cushion that provides stability, the seed corn for future opportunities, and the foundation for retirement. It's what you own, not just what you earn. So what does the distribution of this wealth look like in the United States today? The data reveals a staggering concentration at the very top. The top 1% of households now hold over 32% of the country's total wealth. Let's pause on that for a moment. 1 out of every 100 people controls nearly a third of everything. Imagine 100 people in a room representing the entire country. One person in that room holds a third of all the assets. Now, let's look at the other end of the spectrum. The bottom 50% of the population, half of all Americans, collectively own just 2.5% of the nation's wealth. Back in our room of 100 people, this means that 50 people must share a tiny sliver of the pie, a fraction of what the single wealthiest person holds. The contrast is not just a gap, it's a chasm. For many people in this bottom half, the reality is even more precarious. They have little to no wealth at all. In fact, many are in debt. Their net worth is actually a negative number. When their debts are greater than their assets, they are financially underwater, with every dollar earned going to service loans rather than building a future. This is not just a statistic on a page. It's the lived reality for millions. It's the difference between having a safety net for a medical emergency and facing bankruptcy. It's the difference between investing in your child's education and watching them take on crushing student loans. This huge difference shapes everyday life in profound ways, dictating the choices available, the stresses endured, and the opportunities that can be pursued. This statistic matters because it reveals a system that is fundamentally out of balance. It's a measure of economic fragility for a huge portion of the population. When so much wealth is concentrated at the very top, there is less for everyone else. It's not a zero-sum game, but the flow of capital becomes a self-reinforcing cycle. Wealth generates more wealth through investments, dividends, and appreciating assets, creating a powerful current that pulls resources upward. The old saying is that a rising tide lifts all boats. But this data suggests something different. It suggests the economic engine is not working to lift all boats, but rather to lift a few luxury yachts to unprecedented heights, while many other boats are left behind in the shallows, or worse, are taking on water in the wake. This level of inequality creates a society of winners and losers, where the starting line for one person is the finish line for another. It challenges the very idea of equal opportunity. Circumstances of your birth increasingly determine your chances of success. It strains our social fabric and undermines the promise of equal opportunity. The consequences ripple through every aspect of our communities. Public services suffer. Schools, parks, libraries, because the tax base of the majority is shrinking. Political power becomes concentrated in the hands of the wealthy, who can use money to influence laws and regulations in their favor. This creates a vicious cycle where wealth begets more wealth and more political power, while those without are left with a weaker voice and fewer resources. The American dream becomes harder to reach for millions. We must ask what kind of society we are building. Is it one where a person who works full-time, like Anna, still cannot afford a minor emergency? Is it one where someone can accumulate vast fortunes simply by owning things, without contributing labor? So, why is this gap getting bigger? What is the engine driving this growing divide? There is no single, simple answer, but several powerful forces are pushing the rich ahead and holding others back. It's not that the wealthy work harder. Anna works incredibly hard. The rules of the economic game have been rewritten over decades. Those rules now favor people who already have money, making it easier for them to get richer and harder for others to get ahead. One big reason: money makes money. Most income comes from a paycheck. You work an hour, you get paid an hour. For the very wealthy, much income comes from wealth itself. They own stocks, bonds, real estate, businesses. Those assets produce returns, dividends, interest, capital gains, rent. This is called capital. Wages for the average worker have barely kept up with inflation for 40 years, while returns on capital have soared. So wealth grows much faster than wages. Another key piece: the changing economy. The decline of labor unions left workers with far less bargaining power. Without a collective voice, it's harder to negotiate for better pay, benefits, working conditions. Globalization, automation have pushed down wages, especially in manufacturing and other routine jobs. These forces can grow national wealth, but that wealth hasn't been shared broadly. It has flowed to the top. Finally, government policy. Policy shifts over decades have favored the wealthy. Deregulation of finance led to riskier behavior and bigger rewards at the top. Cuts in public spending, like on higher education, made it harder for families to invest in their kids. And significant changes to the tax system helped concentrate gains. These are choices made by policymakers. This wage stagnation is not just an economic problem, it is a social one. It weakens the bonds that hold a company together. It weakens the bonds that hold a country together. It makes people feel like the system is rigged against them, because in many ways, it is. So, how do we begin to rebuild an economy that works for everyone? The path forward isn't a single action, but a series of deliberate, interconnected steps. Let's start with the foundation of economic security. Step 1. Raise and protect wages. At its core, this is about a simple, powerful idea. A full-time job must pay enough to live with dignity. It's about honoring work and ensuring that the people who keep our society running can afford to live in it. This begins by raising the federal minimum wage to a true living wage, a wage that covers the basics like housing, food, and healthcare in a given community. But a one-time increase isn't enough. To prevent wages from falling behind again, we must index it to inflation. This simple automatic adjustment ensures that as the cost of living rises, so do the paychecks of our lowest-paid workers, preventing them from losing ground year after year. Beyond the wage floor, we must restore the power of workers to advocate for themselves. This means making it easier for them to form unions and bargain collectively for better pay, benefits, and working conditions. Imagine a group of hospitality workers successfully negotiating for health insurance and predictable schedules. That's not just a victory for them. It sets a higher standard for the entire industry. Strengthening rules around overtime pay, ensuring predictable scheduling, and guaranteeing paid sick leave are also critical. For a parent like Anna, knowing her schedule a month in advance means she can plan childcare. Paid sick leave means she doesn't have to choose between her health and her rent. These aren't luxuries. They are the building blocks of stability. A small, consistent raise in pay, coupled with these protections, can transform a life. It can mean the difference between the constant, gnawing anxiety of living paycheck to paycheck and the quiet relief of starting a small savings account for an emergency or for a child's future. It's the freedom to breathe. Step 2, make tax rules fairer. To fund the investments our society needs, we must reform our tax code. It's currently imbalanced, often asking more from people who earn a paycheck than from those who accumulate vast wealth through investments. We need to rewrite the rules so that they ask more from those who have benefited the most from our economy. This means taxing wealth at a rate comparable to how we tax work. For example, a teacher pays income tax on every dollar she earns, but an investor who makes the same amount selling stocks often pays a much lower tax rate, known as the capital gains rate. We should equalize these rates for the wealthiest investors, ensuring that income from wealth is no longer privileged over income from labor. This isn't about punishing success. It's about fundamental fairness and ensuring everyone contributes their share. Furthermore, we must aggressively close the loopholes that allow large multinational corporations and billionaires to legally sidestep their tax obligations, often by shifting profits to offshore tax havens. It's a system that allows some to play by a different set of rules. The revenue generated from a fairer tax system would be substantial. It's not just about balancing budgets, it's about reinvesting in the very foundations of opportunity: our schools, our infrastructure, and our communities. Which brings us to step 3, invest in education and training for all. A person's zip code should never determine their destiny. That's why we need to fully fund high-quality public schools in every single neighborhood, from pre-kindergarten through high school. This means smaller class sizes, modern resources, and competitive salaries to attract and retain the best teachers. And opportunity shouldn't end at graduation. We should make public colleges, universities, and technical schools tuition-free for every qualified student. Consider a young person from a low-income family who dreams of being an engineer. Tuition-free college transforms that dream from a mountain of debt into an achievable goal. Higher education must once again become a gateway to opportunity, not a trap of lifelong debt that stifles risk-taking and delays major life milestones. For those already in the workforce, the economy is constantly changing. To ensure no one is left behind, we need robust, publicly funded job training and apprenticeship programs. Think of a factory worker whose job is automated. A well-designed retraining program could give them the skills to become a technician for the new machinery, securing their place in the evolving economy. Step 4, make housing more affordable. A safe, stable home is not a luxury. It is a basic human need and the bedrock upon which healthy lives and communities are built. Yet for millions, this foundation is crumbling under the weight of skyrocketing costs. We must tackle this crisis head-on. The federal government should partner with states and cities to fund the construction of millions of new, affordable housing units, increasing supply to meet demand. At the same time, we need to strengthen renters' rights nationwide to protect families from unjust evictions and sudden runaway rent hikes that force them from their communities. For those dreaming of homeownership, we can expand down payment assistance programs and access to fair, low-interest loans, opening the door to building generational wealth for families who have been locked out. When families are not crushed by the cost of housing, they can finally invest in other essential areas of their lives. They can afford healthier food, save for retirement, and support their children's education. A stable home provides the security a child needs to thrive in school and the peace of mind a parent needs to succeed at work. Finally, step 5. Strengthen the social safety net. Even in a fair economy, people will face unemployment, illness, or disability. A strong society doesn't leave them to fall. We must modernize and expand our social safety net for the 21st century. This means ensuring access to affordable healthcare for every American, untethered from employment. It means strengthening Social Security so that our seniors can retire with dignity, and it means robust support systems like unemployment insurance and child tax credits that act as a critical buffer during hard times, preventing a temporary crisis from becoming a lifelong catastrophe. These programs are not handouts. They are investments in our collective resilience and shared humanity. They provide the hope and stability that allow people to get back on their feet and continue contributing to our society. The chasm between the very rich and everyone else is not just a statistic on a page. It has become one of the greatest, most defining challenges of our time. It's a structural fault line running deep beneath the surface of our society, threatening the very foundations we stand on. This gap is real, it is vast, and its growth has accelerated in recent decades. And it is actively damaging our economy and our democracy. An economy starved of broad consumer demand cannot thrive. A democracy where the voices of ordinary citizens are drowned out by the megaphone of concentrated wealth cannot function. This inequality sows deep division, pitting neighbor against neighbor. It erodes the fundamental trust we need to solve complex problems together, from public health to climate change. When we no longer feel like we're in the same boat, we stop rowing in the same direction. It makes millions of hardworking people like Anna, feel like the deck is stacked against them, no matter how hard they work or how many rules they follow. They see the goalposts moving further and further away, while their own efforts barely keep them in the game. And in many ways, they are right. Their lived experience is not an illusion. The current rules of the game, from our tax code to our labor laws, are not neutral. They have been shaped to make the rich get richer, while the wages and wealth of ordinary families stagnate or decline. For too many, the promise of upward mobility has been replaced by the reality of running in place, or worse, falling behind. But despair is a luxury we cannot afford. Cynicism is a surrender we must not make. The situation we are in is not the result of some unstoppable, natural force like gravity or the weather. It is not an accident of history. It is the direct result of 4 decades of deliberate policy choices. Choices about who we tax and how much. Choices about the power of corporations versus the power of workers. Choices about what we invest in as a society. And because these are choices, we can choose differently. We retain that power. The 5 steps outlined in this series are not radical dreams pulled from thin air. They are practical, evidence-based, common-sense policies that would begin to rebalance our economy and rebuild a broad and prosperous middle class. They are about investing in our people, ensuring fair pay for a full day's work, and asking those who have benefited the most to contribute their fair share to the society that made their success possible. These are concrete steps toward creating a society where hard work is truly rewarded with a decent life, not just a struggle for survival. A society where every child, regardless of their zip code or their parents' income, has a genuine opportunity to succeed and build a better life for themselves. This isn't about guaranteeing equal outcomes. It's about guaranteeing a fair starting line for everyone. Now, let's be clear. Change will not be easy. The wealthy and powerful who benefit from the current system will fight to protect it. They have the resources to do so. They will spend vast sums on lobbying and public relations. They will argue that these changes are impossible, that we can't afford them, that they will harm the very economy we seek to fix. But we have overcome this kind of resistance before. We have heard these arguments before. The 40-hour work week, Social Security, Medicare, the Civil Rights Act, the right for women to vote. At every turn, opponents claimed these advances were unaffordable, radical, and destructive. Yet today, they are the bedrock of our society. These victories were not given. They were won by ordinary people who organized, who persisted, and who demanded a better future. They remind us that the arc of history bends toward justice, but only when we pull on it together. The future is unwritten, The choices we make now, as voters, as community members, as citizens, will determine whether the gap continues to widen or whether we finally begin to close it. The choice is ours.